Well, hello everybody. How are you doing today? It's post Christmas after day, and well, we survived another one. 2020 25 of Christmas December. You know what it is. It's come and gone, and now that it has gone, now you can return some of those gifts that you were given or you bought to somebody and move on from that. But yeah, I'm here back again, Jedi Grand Vale. This is Jedi Grand Vale Productions, and we're doing up something different here. And I gotta say, this particular outing is going to be a little different. I don't know how long we'll be here, but you know what? I don't mind it being long. I like it being, to the point, and whatever comes next, I will give out. But yeah, this is another episode of my segment called "Personal Junk of Favorites." It's actually a title I created like going on 30 years now. It's just basically stuff that I pick out of the bloom, out of anything in the world that I love. It's a certain subject that I'm into, and it's kind of funny because recently I've been watching old episodes of Wings dealing with old military aircraft, and I'm a big sucker for planes for some reason. I don't know why. Just maybe because I live by an airport miles away, and when I see them fly over, it's just something that gets me going. I just enjoy it. But for this particular subject, I am doing something a little different, and I've done explosions. I've done this. I've done soundtracks like Godzilla films, all that kind of stuff. But this particular outing, I'm doing something where it just popped in my brain one day, and I said, I ought to give it a chance. I ought to give it a shot. I mean, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. If it does, so be it. If it doesn't, like, we'll see where it goes from there. I mean, it's not like it's gonna be a big thing. I mean, for sure, some people say that's not true. It can be a big thing, but what this is all about is if you are in, and I have to explain something about this. We've kind of seen the if and ands about movie comic book films recently. They were on a good incline for a while, and then all of a sudden, and I recently saw one of the teaser trailers for Avengers Doomsday, and it just goes without saying that will this get the whole just comic books in general. I mean, we've had films like James Gunn's Superman come out this year, and it's pretty decent comic book film. It's showing a different tag on how we see comic book films. You know, and I feel like that's something that has to be addressed somehow. I mean, that's just how it should be. But granted, I feel like anybody else, we've kind of felt the fatigue of superhero films. It's just like, man, this is just really out there, and just, I mean, it's just too much. But I figured today I wanted to do a top 30 of some of my favorites out of all the comic book films that have come out between going on 50 years till now, literally. And I have to say, the films that have come out, some of them have been like extraordinary brilliant, to the rest that have been like, I don't know, this doesn't seem like it's necessary. And you don't get me wrong, I did a recent video with one of my boy Daniel Cabretti, where we talked about Howard the Duck. And as bad as that film might be, it's actually got some perks about it that I can enjoy. There's something about the things that I actually like. So it isn't all that bad. It's just that some of it's not all that good. But for this list, it's one where it stands out not in popularity, because to me, I think popularity is an over something, a justification of some things. I feel it's a so-called mesh of how I feel about it. And anyone who decides to do a list like this for themselves, do it for yourself, not for entertainment, not for popularity or whatever. Do it because you like it, and that's the reason why I'm doing this today, which is talking about superhero films, and that's both including both DC and Marvel, which I know Marvel is usually going to be the one that's going to be the top echelon of the list, but don't get us twisted. Not all of the Marvel films have been that good, and we know that some of them kind of like it's all right, it's okay, it's not all that. So here today, we're going to talk about 30 of them, which pretty sure there's, because even a friend of mine, good old DJ Lewis, mentioned, there's a much of them out there. But for here, I'm going to be discussing my top 30 that I personally enjoy and that I feel like, and again, overlook box office, overlook popularity, overlook all that stuff, because frankly, all that is hearsay. I feel like that's it's overrated, so overrated, you know. And this right here is a proof of that, because the list that I have, some might be like, oh, okay, I can see that on there. Others, you'd be like, really, that's on there, but it's at this particular level, yeah. So, with further ado, let's go and get started on the show. So, I have some visual aids. That way you can see them and know which movies I'm talking about and not give it so much of a like, what movie is that about? What are the movies that's it's I'm pretty sure some people will know it, but I mean, I feel it still need to have something to visually say, oh, that's what he's talking about. And I think sometimes you need visual aid sometimes. I mean, you can't just go by bread alone. That's the saying goes. So, with that in mind, we start with the first list or first outing, which is on this. And the first one starting at number 30. We're starting at number 30. We're starting from 30, going on all the way to number one. And we're going to start with number 30, which is The Eternals. Now, granted, The Eternals was, let's be honest, The Eternals was not a box office hit. It was not. It was by no stretch of the imagination. In fact, I can say right now, The Eternals was a, geez, what can I say about Eternals? It's, from my perspective, I feel it should have done better. It was a very slow burn, and it was a long movie. This movie was like 2 hours and 38 or 37 minutes long. And granted, it could have been shorter. You could have been, but I can understand why it was a pretty long film. I can understand why it was a long film, because it's showing the outcome of who the Eternals are and how their whole mission in life is to be, what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be something for instrument of good, but it turns out they're nothing but an instrument of manipulation, because the Celestials or Celestial, that's Armamon, I think that's what his name was manipulating the whole thing by using them to plant seeds to create more Celestials. But through time, something was going on, and you find out they're much older than 5,000 years. These individuals are damn near over 1 million, maybe more than 1 million, and you come to discover this, through a long story and stretch, and you see how they affect, Earth culture in so many ways, and it proves right there how and why, through time, you see why they're able to do what they do in terms of not being manipulated, and find out that they're not the central innocence that they think they are, or they've been manipulated to believe that they are something, and it turns out that's like, okay, we've been played all this time because they've been the brains been mocked up, and then you find out it's like they're not the only ones. They're like copies of copies, but their brains have been downloaded to something else, and it's like, wow. But no, the film is actually fairly well made. It was done by. In fact, let me look her name up. I don't want to just go by her, trying to figure out her name. So that name is up here. That is Chloe Shao. Yes, Chloe Shao, who, believe it or not, she won an Oscar for Best Directing for was it Norman? Yeah, Nomad. Yes. Oh, she directed that film, Hamnet. Okay, didn't know that. But yeah, she won an Academy Award for Best Directing, and they chose her for this particular film. And I gotta say, she did a pretty good job for what it was. I mean, it was the first time we've seen interactions with not so much interracial, sex on screen in a Marvel film, but also, we've seen where someone who is you know, who is gay, we've seen homosexuality in an MC in an not MC, yeah, MCU. I think we have seen this. I think this was the first time we've seen homosexuality in the MCU, but I wasn't for sure. I can't be for sure for if that was the first time. It might have been. And if it was, it's like so be it. I mean, it's not like it was pushing. It was just something that we see that these individuals characterize who they are, and it just shows how it goes from there. But no, this is number 30 for me. Eternals is like I say, it's a better film than some people give it credit for. But I feel like the reason why, and it's like I say, this was a big box office bomb, but I think it did well in the physical media for whatever, And like I say, don't write it off that it's super bad, because it's not. It's not super bad. But moving on, we're going to number 29, and well, I mean, you see it there. That is rest in peace, Wakanda forever, Black Panther. Yes, and this is the first time we see. Well, this is not actually the first time we've seen black superheroes in films. It's been some before this. Um, Robert Townsend did Meteor Man some while back, but and it was part of the DCU or MCU. It was just its own entity. But Black Panther, yes, let's say this movie exploded on the screen, and I mean, it's a very well made film by Ryan Coogler, who recently did Sinners earlier this year, which I have to say is probably the best film this year to come out in 2025. I have to say. But yeah, Black Panther is one of those films that shows a lot of credibility and shows where it's pretty much what it's done, what it has done. It's representing a culture, it's representing, showing that black people, basically anyone of black stature or African descent, we're not what we've been shown in the past. We're something more than that. But as well as I do, like anything else, there's always, always, always going to be some kind of misrepresentation of what something should be. We're always going to see that. That's here no say, and it's always going to be that kind of way. And it's kind of sad that it is like that, because we know as well as anything that all different groups of races get mistreated in some kind of sense. You know, so that is number 29. So we'll move on. coming in at 28, and this might be controversial that this is even on the list. Captain Marvel, starring Brie Larson. Okay, we can honestly say that Brie Larson probably got a big head. We can say that. Is whether you agree or disagree that she does or does not, that's your choice. But the movie to me is one example of how sad to say, it's sad to say that, this is because I've said it before, this is probably the best example of how can I say, the best example of a Supergirl film. And the reason why I say a Supergirl film, because the 1984 Supergirl film was, as a teenager, don't mind it, it's okay. But you get older and you still discover that film is, as an adult, it's like, what was I thinking and looking at that? And I think the reason why it was like the way it is, because they didn't want to show up Christopher Lee's performance as Superman, the 78 version. And it's like, okay, if she's strong, we shouldn't do it in a sense of showing that she's not strong. She's a superpowered human being, just like her cousin, But this movie here is a perfect example of like, okay, it's not so much the best, but it's still got where it counts, because in the end, we see her really come to a potential and power. And it's like, yes, that's what I want to see, because this is not, and sad to say, this is not so-called being woke. This was at a time when wokeness was starting to erupt, and unfortunately, this might have been the start of, this film might have started it up. But at the same time, I don't think it's that bad. I think it's actually a pretty good pleasure cruise of showing that a woman can be strong and she can be, powerful. Although behind the scenes, seemed like Brie Larson was kind of cocky. She was kind of cocky, and goes without saying that if you're cocky, yes, this is going to be the example of that. And that's probably why she's got this bad reputation now. So we move on. So on the 27 is the second Iron Man film, starring Robert Downey Jr. And so many things about this film is, I could say it's a little bit better in terms of the first Iron Man, but not really. It's it's got good qualities in the sense of, especially the ending. And I always noticed this with some films when it's a second film of the superhero that's being portrayed. There's always got to, and this is a trope I've noticed a lot with superhero films. It always has to have some kind of, power deflect, or something that their powers are not as great and something's really happening to them wrong. We've seen it in Superman 2. We've seen it in Spider-Man 2. I'm trying to think, was there another one specifically? It's I'm not sure, but you kind of get my drift. It's always been that trope. And I guess because we got to have something more enduring with the character to deal with. In this film, Tony has to deal with polonium poison. It's starting to affect him. It powers the suit, but at the same time, it keeps him alive. But at the same time, it's killing him slowly. So it's amazing that this film is what it is, because he has to deal with his demons and deal with some things from the past that his father dealt with. It's a perfect example of how things can happen. But like I say, and this was a stepping stone more to the Avengers film that would come out 2 years later. But again, the film, it's okay, but I mean, I feel like with the further ones in, I think it's all right for what it is. So on to the next one, which is 26, and this is the first of the DC films that I feel is going to be mentioned in here, and that is Batman Begins. This is Christopher Nolan in the example of exploring the superhero genre. And let's just say, I don't believe I knew about Christopher Nolan at this point. I'm thinking I did, but I mean, the names sounded familiar, but I think this is, for me, his real true breakout moment as a director. This is when I really recognize him. And this film is actually 20 years old now that I think about it. And like anything, he came out the gun, might as well say out the gun running. He pretty much showed that he can direct, but at the same time direct a film that that's dealing with a comic book figure, a most iconic comic book figure. And Batman here is really no exception. Batman shows really his origins and really shows how he came to be the so-called Dark Knight. And in time, he would be, honing his own skill set of becoming what he is at best at, defending people and everything. We got some cup. Hey, what's up, there, Nubis? Yes. Yes, and well, look, trust me, it's way low. Begins is way low, true enough. But here's what you're going to find out. One of them is way high. So that makes up for that, And you'll probably be, and like I say, it's then like I say, it is way low. Then you can say that, I guess you could say Iron Man 2 is too low, but this is, trust me, it's way low. Well, true. I mean, and trust me, and I should have said this earlier too before I began. This film, I mean, not this film, but this whole list that I have here was way more, not so much difficult. It was way more of a challenge in describing which ones that I feel are like here and some are here, And that's why I say this is going to be kind of not so much controversy, but it's going to be like some people, as Nuba said, Begins is kind of low for where it's at. Well, yes, it's low for some people's point of view, but for me, it's not so much low because trust me, there's some past 30, they're way lower. And if you think about the ones that are going to be mentioned later on in this list, you got to realize like, oh shit, I guess that makes sense that it would probably be that low. Although anyone can see it a little bit differently than what I'm putting out there, So, and yeah, see, that's the thing. And as I said before, this was not when I was doing the list, and I did it in like less than 3 hours. I didn't realize how incredibly difficult, because I started with the first one that was at the top of the list at number one and moved my way down. And as I moved my way down, I didn't realize like, whoa, this is way harder than I thought. And it's not that easy because you have some that should be way up there, but then you realize like, no, some things are more lower than others, and that's why you have to realize that you have to really pick and choose which ones you feel are more up there. It's just how it is. I mean, it's not. And here's the thing about that: it's not to say that the ones I'm picking out are bad. That's like the low list. It's low there. They're not bad. It's just that I feel like they're not as good as the ones that I feel are later on the list. And And trust me when I say, if they're on the list, that shows how much I enjoy them. Because honestly, I would not have them on here. Yeah, see, even the news agrees with that. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, things like this are not easy to do, but at the same time, it's a great challenge to put them out there and make people realize, like, hey, if you were to do something similar like this, you might be surprised how hard or maybe easy to make a list like this. But for me, I found it challenging. And knowing that it was challenging, that's why I know it was hard to do. That's why I know it was, in a way, you know, a reason to do it, because it makes me make me question, is like, which one did you feel are really should be out there? So that is the kind of thing I put out there, and that's the kind of thing I put on this list, But moving on, we get to our second outing of 5 of them. And I'm pretty sure people look at this and they're going to be like, what? Really? Well, yes. Okay. So, and I must say that one of my favorite of the trilogy films are on this particular part. And coming in at number 25 is one of the X-Men films, which is Days of Future Past. And I gotta say, now you would think that would probably be a little higher than what's on this list, but I mean, again, this is why I say, if you just do this list, if you do something like this, you really looking at putting yourself like, is that what I would put it at this particular point in time? Maybe so. You look back and it's like, maybe that should have been higher or lower, but then again, you got to be honest with yourself before you be honest with someone else, But like I say, The Days of Future Past was a very complex film. It's basically a time traveling film, and I gotta say, for a time traveling film, going back to the and this is gonna make me feel old. I don't know if I knew this, but goes back to the year of my birth, 1970. And this is at a crucial time, because it takes place in the future. When I say it takes place in the future, Sentinels that have been created by Drax Industry, and they're wiping out all manner of mutants at all. And anyone who helps the mutants, they'll be enslaved. So basically, what it boils down to, man has become their own extinguisher. You're trying to extinguish all of the so-called mutants because they feel like a threat. But in the end, what it comes down to, who's the true threat? The ones who created these sentinels to wipe out things, and not just the mutants, but sometimes the human beings too who are helping them. It's an incredible film. I mean, it shows where the little that is starts to combine together who they are, and I feel like that's the thing we have to look at. But no, Days of Future Past is the X-Men. It's truly a remarkable comic book film, and this is one of the ones that's Marvel, but it was with 20th Century Fox before it became 20th Century Studios. Way before that, So that is my number, 25. Now 24. Again, you would think this would not be this low on the totem pole of the list, but as I said before, the other ones that are on this list are going to be much higher than you think they are. So number 24, the first Iron Man film. Yes, the first Iron Man film with Robert Downey Jr. And we must admit, Robert Downey Jr. was a perfect example of good casting, because like a lot of people have thought, because I thought the same thing, is he really worth the title of Tony Stark? Is he really something that you would put out there and feel like that he's the best choice for to play this role? Well, you know, you're gullible enough. You think like, okay, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But you have to remind yourself, just because someone says, he's going to play it, don't mean it's going to work out. Well, and this is when MCU studio, Marvel Studios first really became a staple, and before Disney bought them out, this is when we realized that uh, Marvel Studios was coming into their own, and this was their first shot at an independent filming arena. And I know when I went to go see this with my nephew, I took my nephew to go see it. I didn't know what to expect from it. And it really shows how Tony became what he is at this. And the funny thing is, remember this, the film was an example of the so-called mesh of, superheroes coming out of Marvel that other studios had put in, like Universal had the Hulk. 20th Century Fox had, the X-Men and Fantastic Four and, Daredevil, although Daredevil and Fantastic Four films are, yeah. They had X-Men, and then Columbia had Spider-Man. So they were taking some of the best of the best, but the lowest was, eventually going to be like the ones that like will become more iconic because of the actors. We didn't know whether this was going to play out or not. We didn't know. We had no idea. And surprisingly, the gamble of this paid off again. Because Robert Downey Jr. did it. And if anyone knows about Robert Downey Jr.'s past, see the past, and you say, "Oh, let's continue to talk about the past." But here we forget the past, look to the future, and we realize, hey, all that happened in the past is the past. And that's exactly in this film how you can say he is a character was a womanizer, all these things and all this, and just a flamboyant flyboy. But once he sees who he really is, he makes a change, and he realizes in the end his past no longer matters, and he realizes like, I'm going to make some changes about what's important to the world and to myself. And Iron Man was the first vehicle to show that anyone can change if you really put your mind to it and be serious about it. But that's my number 24. So on the 23 is the first of the Captain America films. And I gotta say, when I first saw this film, it's called Captain America: The First Avenger. This was another example of a film that I was kind of like, and I managed to catch this in this theatrical run before it went out and left the theater. But this was a film, another character, Chris Evans, who previously had done Johnny Storm in two of the Fantastic Four films. I was biased about him playing this part, but I think he really truly put his acting chops on and became something that's iconic. And this is the thing. Captain America was not one of those really big hyped, characters in comic books, because he's pretty simple. He's somebody who started out as, a so-called weakling because his name is Steve Rogers, but his heart is strong in knowing that he defends, what needs to be done right. And his character, and like I say, I think Chris Evans really pulled it off by doing that, and thankfully it became what it is. It's just like it came on, like I say, I'm like, okay, well, this is probably as good as I'm going to see, Captain America in this studio, because when we see him in the Avengers, it's like, well, probably all we're going to see him in is the Avengers and some other Avengers space, but I didn't know about other films that he's going to do. The character is going to do later, And like I said, Hugo Weaving in the part of Red Skull. I wish he could have stayed around for, certain things, in the future films. But unfortunately, politics and certain things come up and just didn't work out that way. So push on. 22. Iron Man 3. It's funny how this film is a bit on my list higher than Iron Man 1. And I think this is the combination of what I feel like Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 1 should have been. Iron Man 3 is really the combination of those, I feel. And this is where we realize, Tony is suffering from PTSD from the battle in New York. And, find out, is he the separation of it? Basically, is he Iron Man or is he Tony Stark? And you kind of find out it's like, well, maybe I'm both, but I just don't know, And I just feel like, this is the combination where, he finally figures out who he is. And then you realize this is, somebody kind of jokingly said, this is more of a, a copycat of the Incredibles, because his character does something wrong to someone, and turns out that that person will become vicious, later on, and becomes a villain. But no, we see. And the funny thing in this film is he keeps using the same prototype suit over and over again. Like, it's like, can you use not something else, another suit and everything? But he doesn't do that. So he is what he is, But in the end, he gets the bad guys, and he wins victoriously, and still gets the girl in this film. So that's 22. 21. The first Guardians of the Galaxy films. Yes, this is another example of where we say gamble in terms of, what can you get out of from a talking tree, talking raccoon, and various other characters. And I got to say, I think the reason why this movie works is because James Gunn. James Gunn pulled this off brilliantly, because I know I heard about the film before it became a film. I heard about it through art, certain concept art. And I was kind of like, ain't no way they're going to make a damn film that has a talking raccoon and a talking branch or tree or whatever. I was like, that ain't happening. It's like, and then when I saw the trailer for it, it's like, okay, maybe, it's just maybe good, maybe not. I don't know. But the film turns out to be like, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. Excuse me. This is not going to work. In fact, it's going to be horrible. This is what I was saying. This is me 10 years ago. I was like, this ain't going to work. This is not going to work. That's why I know that James Gunn was a brilliant director. He's a much brilliant director than most people give him credit for. And I feel that that's the reason why it worked out in the end. That's the reason why this became such an iconic story in terms of film. And some have said they've kind of compared this film to to New Hope a little bit, but because it's a ragtag band of individuals, but they become to be known as the Guardians, and they, like I say, they are tip top in what they do, and they're amazing at what they do, and I feel like that's the reason why they become the crew that they are now, because they come to really love one another and respect one another, and be all that they can be. So it just goes to show you that along the lines, that's you take a chance on something, and you try to see that, okay, this is one of the reasons why you take chances, because you don't know how it's going to work out. You have no idea how it's going to work out. don't know what's going to work out. And thankfully, this film did work out for the better for not just the people who took the gamble, the studio, but the people who come to watch it, who come to appreciate it and realize like, hey, this is probably a good film. You know, you can't say it isn't a good film because if it wasn't a good film, it wouldn't got made. And sure enough, we had volume one, and then we had volume two, then we had volume three, and there you go. And then of course James Gunn left Marvel, but I think maybe for the better. It depends on your point of view. But everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But that's the first. That's the first part of the 30 countdown. Now we're getting in the top 20, and with the top 20, we start with this particular band. And as I said before, this list is it's always up to a person who's watching if they say it's like, I don't know if that's should be on this list. Well, it's my list, so I'm going to say what I will say. At number 20 is the first Avengers film. I wouldn't think you can do this list without having, although it's up to the individual, as I said again. This is the first of the Avengers films. It's called The Avengers, not Avengers. It's called Marvel's The Avengers. And this was the combination of all the superheroes that was part of the Marvel Studios bunch. And to me personally, this film got us going with how we see these mesh of individuals team up and see where it goes. So I mentioned Captain America, I mentioned Iron Man, but also we also have Iron Man. We have the Hulk, the Thor, the Black Widow, and Hawkeye. And the funny thing is about this is that we see how the combination of these individuals come to play, and we see them start out, not as a team. We see them having button heads and everything, but I think you got to start small with some things before you get balloon it into, because what we find out that years later that all the people who've been kind of culminated in the universe come together and they really come out fighting what they do. So number 20 Avengers is a good example of how you get the ball rolling. And Joss Whedon, I think he did an excellent job in producing this film, directing it and everything. So that's my number 20. Now my number 19. It's volume 2 of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, whether the first one had a little bit more action in terms of, its style and everything, I feel the second one, I love action, I will always do, but I feel this one had a little bit more character-driven moments. And it was not the first time, it's like the second time I've actually cried when it comes to, emotions in a comic book film. Because the emotions in this film run dry, and I guess it kind of affected me a little bit because I kind of, any film I watch, I tend to see certain parallels in my own universe and how it affects me. And Quill, finding out his father is the reason why his mom dies in the first half. The first Guardians. And it's just like, wow, when he gets hit with that information, it's like, whoa, this guy is not exactly who I thought he was. So looking for your father and discovering who that person really is takes it back, and you discover right away why some things happen the way they do, and like I say, it runs rampant, and then, like I say, it comes to conclusion where's it go from here? Where do we go from here? But that's my number 19. Coming in at 18 is probably one of the best of the X-Men films during this Fox days, was this X2 X-Men United. Now, what Days Future Past did, which was showing Quicksilver's, speed and everything, this film, it definitely upped the ante from the first X-Men that came out in 2000, and it definitely got you hyped up for what was coming, because when we see Nightcrawler's mission to assassinate the president, so-called assassinate the president, oh my God, dude! I mean, in the music that accommodates it, really gets you going, really gets you hyped up. And the funny thing is, I could tell looking at it, watching it, that it was not going to be your standard, comic book film in that sense. It was going to be something totally, totally different, epic wise, And I'm just like, and thing about it is, it's smaller, and it's not, it's smaller than what the Days of Future Past was, but it still has a very character driven, because you have different stories going along the way during this time. And I feel like that is such a beautiful thing, you know. Because Days of Future Past was badass, but X-Men X2 was a combination of what you do for a comic book film. And I think that's what you have to do when it comes to that, you know. But coming in at number 18. Coming in at number 17 is another of the DCEU films, which is Aquaman. And I gotta say, James Mimosa as Aquaman, I really have to say this film really surprised me. Directed by James Wong, and talking about, a character that's well known in the comic book field, but coming out the box running. I didn't really think that this film was going to hold up either. This is another, not because of James Mimosa playing Aquaman, but just the film in general. And I know when I went to go see it in the theater, I was like, whoa, this film is actually pretty damn good. This film is actually pretty well made, and I think that was the whole purpose of what James Wan was doing. He was giving you a good story, but at the same time showing what is capable of, how characters should be. I mean, you could say the characters are meek and whatever, they're kind of one-sided, but it's like, no, some things are done for a reason, while others, it's a reason why some people do what they do. And trying to discover yourself, who you are, is another thing that comes into play with all these things. So, but going on to number 16 is Spider-Man 2, which was directed by Sam Raimi and starring Tobey Maguire in his second outing as the web crawler. And again, you think like this would be this low on the totem pole, but again, you got to remember some of the films that are on here that I've seen. There are some that came out before some of these films, and they're kind of higher, but at the same time, how they affected me through time is the reason why they're here. And like I say, this was a much more robust version of Spider-Man after the incredible success of the first Spider-Man that came out in 2002. And I gotta say, when I went to the midnight screening of this film, I didn't know what to expect from it. And I can get the vibe that, yeah, this film is a lot better than I expected it to be, and it is, like I say, really up there in terms of blending of storyline, the characters, and whatnot, and showing that they have so much to get. I mean, because like I say, this was another example of a film where Spider-Man is losing his powers, but it only what it is he's not sure if he wants to be a superhero anymore. But as it turns out, it's just that he's frustrated. He's not sure of who he is or what he wants. And in the end, it's like I have to be this in order to culminate to being, you know, a balance. You know, and the balance is I must be Spider-Man in order to be who I am for the world. Because that cat's out the bag. That genie's out the bottle. It's done. He has to be something totally else. You know, so he has to be who he is in order to maintain what has to be from all this. So Spider-Man 2 is one of a better of those comic book films that along the way has become what is iconic. This introduction of Doc Ock and Alfred 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 Molina does a great job as Doc Ock, and like I say, the movie is spectacular in what it does. Especially at the end where we see that you know he gives his life in the end to do what he does. So, but pushing on the second half of 20, we go in with and part of some of the DCU films from, of course, DC, which is number 15, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. And I gotta say, this is a very well made film. And don't get it twisted because it's directed by a woman. That's the reason why it's good. I mean, some men can direct women in action, but sometimes it's not as great. You know, and this film was extraordinary. Seeing Gal Gadot in her first, solo outing here, and we see how a person who's believing that if you believe something, and really, if you watch this film, it's almost the telling of um, the Bible sense in a sense of word. And the reason why I say in the Bible sense because we see that Wonder Woman is nothing more than maybe I'm getting too kind of on too critical on that, but it's almost a scene of like dealing with a fallen angel and knowing that what's the real truth behind all this and showing that man is always going to be bad, but that doesn't mean all of them are bad. Some of them do have good, some are misled, and basically the person that's Artemis, which is him, he's like the devil and he's misleading people, but he doesn't do anything that they don't want to do. All he just do is just tempt them and go from there. And Wonder Woman is naive to thinking that it's straight man that's doing these wrongs, but it's like no, killing this person is not going to stop them. You have to stamp out what's at the core to make it happen. And surprisingly, she learns from naivety, that okay, I guess maybe I didn't get the whole picture before, and that's the thing here. Let's see here. Okay, what's up, Uncle Man? How you doing? Well, not so much accuracy. I mean, accuracy of not. In fact, it's kind of fun. It's good. It's good. That's a very good question. It's not for its accuracy, but how the film has the effect on as individuals like myself, and like I say, the characters, the tone, the storyline, and all that. Because honestly, let's be honest. I mean, I have seen. I mentioned before Howard the Duck, and some of the Howard the Duck moments were like, okay, they're just playing on certain things, but it's like, no, this is not what it's about. But no, it's basically the tone of the film because, like I say, it's more in general. Are you taking the character and doing it justice? You know, are you doing it justice and you're doing it well for what you're showing? Because if you're not, then what's the point of making the film? Because I know when Ryan Coogler did Black Panther, he really dug deep into the core of this character, but the metaphor, what is representing, for culture or anything like that. That to me is what it's boiled down to. But yeah, I mean, it's sometimes they can get their suits wrong, sometimes they can get the power levels wrong, and all these kind of things. So it's it's a mixed bag of that. That's the thing. It's a big mix of bag of that. Octomad. It's and like I say, it was kind of a difficult list as I mentioned before. It's a difficult list to put together, but all the same, it's all about how you put this into a format where you as the viewer who's watching it enjoys it. Because if you don't enjoy it, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be, you know. And I've seen many films before where the story no, basically the characters suck, but the story still has something about it. But it's like I'm not I'm not investing in the characters. You got to invest in the characters. You got to invest in their time and what they're doing. Because if you don't, then the movie just sucks altogether. And that's always been my thing about it. You have to have strong story. I mean, you have to have strong characters that motivate the story. And if you don't, it's always going to be, be like that. Well, I mentioned before, I told this to Anubis, who came on, and yeah, he says like that's. I'm surprised that you have this particular movie at this particular part of the list. It's like it's not an easy list. It is really not an easy list because like I said, I have to be true to who I am, not true to because anybody else watching, that it's like that. I wouldn't have put that up there. I wouldn't put this on the list. I wouldn't put this at the particular point in time where I'm showing. I wouldn't do that. But that shows right there that you cannot say what will and what won't. You can't say that. You can't say that you're going to put it on a list that's going to be here, what's not going to be there, and think that that's supposed to arrive because of popularity or consensus of everyone. It's like no, I can easily say that certain Godzilla films, would not be because I've had this list before done with some other people, and people were like, "Why is that on the list? Why is this at the highest? Where this one's at the lowest?" Because that's how I feel about it. That's how it affected me. It has to have that effect factor in order for you to pinpoint why you are enjoying it or why it's up here to begin with, you know. And it's never so much that it has to be because I mean, like I say, I'm pretty sure anyone who makes a list like this, if you do, and I'll give this little hint at this too. If you were to do something like this, I would say do just 10, unless they do 20 or 30, because 30 was pushing it. 20, you can pretty much, gather your thoughts. 10 is like really like hone in which one is really at the top. And this is one of the reasons why I started at 30, because I feel like it would make more sense to say that, I mean, so many of them out there, but let me get the ones that really affected me the most and see where it goes from there. So it's always kind of like that. Let's see. That's a pretty good question there. Hmm. You know what? Truth be told, I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind something like that. But to say that they would put that in the, and that would be kind of funny if someone was to do something like that, do a comic book version of that, do a movie version of that. Um, I don't know if I want to see that because it's true you're kind of crossing, two different universes, and it would definitely make money for sure. But you shouldn't do it for money. You should do it for, as a friend of mine, Mr. Kevin Lambert said, you should do it for, the story and how you bring the characters to life and how they come together like this. Um, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I mean, in fact, I think that'd be totally badass if they would do something like that. I wouldn't mind seeing something like that. But to answer part of the other question is, who would I like to see directed? Oh shoot, that's kind of hard there. That's kind of interesting take on that. I don't know. I can only surmise that the person that's, I put it like this: I would pick someone who is a filmmaker, but who is a storyteller, who wants to tell a good story. Because I always believe it's all about story, not about how this should be filmed, how it should be. It's all about the story, and then fall in how you're going to make it feel real in terms of bringing out the characters and the story and all the events that go on with that. So as far as directing, I couldn't give you a definite answer on that, because there are some decent directors out there, but I'm thinking they're not getting their shot. There's always sticking to, you know, and I'm talking about and I'm not talking about the season one. I'm talking about the ones who actually still do films and they're doing stories very well. I'm talking about the ones who are. I would. I'm just gonna say this. I would not want James Cameron to direct it because to me it's all about the blue people. I just don't think he's doing a good. He's only focusing on that, and it's like you got so much on you got so much more initiative, you got so much more to give, but you're sticking with the blue people. Are you doing it because it's making you money, or are you doing it because you're telling a story? And I have to say the first is more the reason why, and it's kind of sad that is what it's leading to, because that's what I feel and believe that's what he's doing. But well, now to answer your question, I don't know who I would want to direct that Godzilla and Kong versus the Justice League outing, because I couldn't tell you. That's, I mean, would I want to see something like that? I wouldn't mind if they bring it out and do it well. But other than that, I can only say that's a what you call kind of dream that could possibly happen. But yeah, only time will tell if it was to happen and come to realization. But we'll see. You never know. I mean, life is stranger than fiction, so anything's possible. So, but to get back to the list, and now you know what? I can actually see Del Toro doing something like that, or even Tony Gallerio. Yeah, I could actually see either one of those. That would be a bad idea. You know, see, that's the example I'm talking about. These are guys who actually can hone in and do very well storytelling. Not just creative filmmaking. They actually can do stories with good driven characters. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I wouldn't mind seeing that. That wouldn't be a bad idea. But then too, would Hollywood jump into it though? That's the question. Because Hollywood is nothing much more than a money making whore. You know. But I won't put too much of that politics out there, because people will start to gank me and say that, oh, you just a what you call kind of individual. I know I'm somebody who's a traditionalist who wants to see good films made, and something that's where it's something that has been seen time and time again. Because it seems like that's all we're doing in Hollywood is regurgitating the same damn shit, you know. But now let me get back to my list though. So I said 15 with Wonder Woman. Now we move over to 14, which is Joker, which I feel like, and this is why I say comic book films, not superhero films, because we all know the story of Joker, and this film was dude. Joker was such a impactful film when it came out, because I wasn't for sure if it was going to be, you know, what it is. Well, thank you. Well, brother, I don't look. I'm just me. I'm not, look. I'm not somebody who's going to BS you no kind of way. I mean, I'm not going to do that. That's not me. I don't give people false narratives or anything like that. I don't do that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people out there who do that, who say something, but of course do a complete another, and it's like, wow, that's what that is, you know. So no, I'm not going to BS you, bro. I'm going to be truthfully honest with what I feel, and I'm always going to be upfront and saying that. I mean, I try not to hurt people's feelings, but in the end, it's like you're going to hurt their feelings no matter what. So be honest with yourself and telling them that that's how you feel about something, you know. But getting back to the list, um, Joaquin Phoenix playing the Joker in this film. This film was such a brilliant example of how you do a comic book film well, as I say it. You know, I guess it really depends on who's watching and whatever. Anyway, no, but no, the film is just a big bag of, because it's in the Batman world for sure, but we're looking at who the Joker is and where his so-called beginnings is, and we realize what leads him to become a villain, you know. And it's like he was trying to be a villain. I mean, that's one thing I can say this film does well, is showing that a villain a villain will choose to be who they are, but what led them to this is an example of what led them to be a villain to begin with. We can see heroes time and time again become the heroes that they are, why they become heroes. But why a villain becomes a villain is because they just want to be the, you know, mustache twirlings, like, I will rule the world. I will do. No, we see that he's had such dark past with, you know, people and individuals, and you realize, like, you know what? If I can't be something that's generally, you know, solid to walk on, then I'm going to become the worst of the worst in myself, you know. And that's what he becomes. He becomes the worst of the worst. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know, that's the thing about all those things, you know. And that's true. It does, like I say, it, because I know when I saw the trailer for that film, I didn't know how to take it, you know, and I didn't. I'm sorry to say I didn't see it in the theater. I wish I had seen it in the theater, but it's a brilliant piece of, you know, art, and a brilliant piece of showcasing, you know, that anyone who becomes a villain only because of certain circumstances, it's always up to the individual to make the choice of what they want to become. And see, I have to tell you this. This is the thing about me. I'm always been that kind of person when it comes to you know, kind of breaking something down about, you know, certain movies that are done well. And knowing that when I see the reasons why he becomes the way he is, we see backstories of the city, you know, clamoring with, you know, we see there's a, you know, garbage man strike. We see that some things are going on here. You realize that the Joker is dealing with certain psychological things, but it's not like he's trying to push it on himself, you know. Um, and look, and trust me, that's okay. You know, you should. You know, I mean, if you was to do a list like this, I would say put it at the top. I mean, put it at the top of where you feel like it belongs. You know, you should. You should. Octo, you should do that. You know, I mean, because I know. Then when that's the reason why I say this, it's on here anyway. You know, because it had an effect on me. You know, I wouldn't just put it on here just me putting it on here. I mean, it's like, no, it's up here because it has such an amazing effect on me, and truth be told, if it didn't have an effect on me, it would never have been on this list to begin with. You know, but that's how you do it. That's how you do. That's why you really hone in on yourself. What do you feel on something to get it going to begin with? You know, and like I say, again, if someone was due to, in fact, let me see something real quick. I'm just curious here. Um, uh, um, oh, wait a minute. This is. I just realized who this is. I'm sorry, Neenan. Oh my God, dude. I am so sorry. I just realized who this is. I just realized who this is. Oh my God. Oh my God. That's my. Oh, Nina, I am so sorry, bruh. I am so sorry. Wait a minute. Uh, yes, it sure didn't. Bruh, I am so sorry. I just realized who you were. I am so sorry. This is okay. This is yes. I didn't even realize till I looked at the name, and then I was like, "Oh, that's who that is." Now, yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. I totally get it. I am so sorry, brother. What is that? What up here? Yeah, that's Neenan. Okay, huh? All right, Neenan. Yeah, Lieutenant himself. Okay. Yeah, but no, you're right though, Neenan. Yeah, Todd Phillips. I mean, that shows right there. Like Jordan Peele, he proves himself on. You can do comedy, but you can hone in on the dramatic really well if you really focus on what's being brought out. You know, I was like, that's a beautiful way of showcasing that. Yes, my yes, there you go. And I'm your southern brother, bro. Yes, but no, you're right though. I mean, the movie, like I say, Todd Phillips really honed in a lot with this film, and that's why I say you can't let those who do a certain genre get shot out by when they do a certain film that's more dramatized later on, and that's why never think that because they do comedy that they can't do drama well. Some have told me that some people, those who do comedic roles, can do drama really well, whereas people who do drama can do very comedic roles very well. You know, I mean, AKA Leslie Nielsen or Jim Carrey. He's done many dramatic roles and does them well. So this film here is no exception to the rule, as the saying goes. But moving on to well, and yeah. Unfortunately, that's Hollywood's thing right there. It's like they don't do that well nowadays. I mean, the ones that do stick out do that, and I feel like if they did it and show that's like, okay, you got to remember the audience out here is watching is not stupid. You might have some low IQ kind of people out here, but yes, but no, that's the thing though. I mean, it's treat the audience with respect enough to know that that's what they're doing and that's what they're coming up with, you know. But let me get on to the next one, up to number 13, which is Thor Ragnarok. And this, out of all the Thor films that came out and after, as my boy sci-fi would say, love and blunder. Lord, that movie. This is probably the best of the Thor films, and it's is it heavily is it very humorous based? Yeah, it is. Taco Waititi, Takakakiti. I can't say his name too well. Anyway, he was chosen to direct this film, and I can see why, because it has such comedic, attributes to it, but at the same time, it has very strong, reasons on why he was chosen for, because he's well known to for for this film, and he did it real well. It gives you that. And honestly, when I watch the film, it almost feels like a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of mesh, to a degree, because Guardians Volume 2 came out early that year, and I can see how it kind of fits in, because there's a little cameo of Jeff Goldblum in Guardians of the Galaxy at the very end of the credits, and you see him in this film here, and it's like he plays off himself very well with the other characters, So it's very, very well done, very well done. But no, this is Thor being shown that he's not all he think he is, and when he comes to find out that he was something, that he wasn't the first of his father's children, and you turn out it's like, yes, you're not the favorite, although you're not the most powerful, And like I say, Thor Ragnarok was, and this is right before Infinity War, so it's let's say it's definitely on the high of the echelon of films in terms of the Marvel films, But again, that's why I say these films affect me in certain ways, but more than others, do. But going on to number 12 is, I had to put my boy up there, the Merc with the Mouth, Deadpool. Now, I got to say, Deadpool, I don't even really think I knew this character very well. This shows that I'm not the biggest comic book or enthusiast, as I like to say. I'm not the biggest, or knowledgeable, as I should say. I should say, whatever. Not the most knowledgeable. But I didn't really know who he was, and the only time I actually heard about him was in X-Men Origins Wolverine, and we're introduced to Wade Russell, and played brilliantly by best casting choice ever, Ryan Reynolds. And I didn't realize he was, this annoying prick. I didn't know this, but I didn't know that he wore red. I didn't know that he, did all these other mundane things. I didn't realize he was somebody who breaks the fourth wall. And course correction, all the comic book characters, She-Hulk was the first to break the fourth wall. If anyone knows this I do know, But Deadpool will become a fan favorite years later, and it's ironic that of certain circumstances, She-Hulk is really not that favored now nowadays because of bullshit. But the 2016 movie, was an idea someone had in low res production. And it's like, let's try to make this come to life. And on a low budget of 60 mil, they didn't have as much as but that shows right there the creativity of bringing this character to the screen. And as it turns out, he would become one of the most noticeable characters in comic book characters in film history. And as it turns out, here he is now, still years later. That movie came out almost 10 years ago, but in fact, yes, come next February, it'd been 10 years since this film came out. Now that I think about it, I was just like, oh shit. See how time flies when you're having fun? That's just how it is, man. But yeah, it came out, and like I say, it turns out that he was something that people wanted to see, and when you watch it, you realize that there was something of a change that some people wanted to see, and Deadpool was one of those characters that people wanted to see because it still honed in the breaking of the fourth wall, still gave that comedy, that humor that we see, But at the same time, we see that because this film, even though it does all these things that we know that Deadpool to do, we realize that he's not who we think he is either. We realize that he's more than that. He's more than just some merc with a mouth. He's somebody who's hurting. He's in pain. He's his mind is cracked. Because of certain things. And we really get the sense of like he's broken character. You know, mentally and physically too. I mean, he can regenerate. He can't necessarily die, but he's somebody who is where he's at now. And like I say, that film totally took it to the next level in terms of showing that it is possible to make a well-made film that has a character that breaks the fourth wall, but it's a very good storytelling film, as the saying goes. And there it is. The rest is history. The proof's in the pudding, as the saying goes. So we've got the 12, and what we got here is well, I mean, it depends on your point of view. I mean, he was based on a comic strip. Well, I'm talking about in terms of comic book, graphic art. I mean, graphic novels or something like that. You want to say, but I mean, yeah, I mean, that would be the case. He kind of did, but that was like back in the like 40, late 30s, early 40s, something like that. I'm not for sure. I mean, because as I said again, I'm not the best versed in comic book lore, so I couldn't tell you. I'm not. I am not the so-called expert on that. So, but getting back to the list, we get to number 11, which is, and I gotta say, people may say they may like The Suicide Squad by James Gunn, I mean it's all right, but to me this version of the Suicide Squad is the better one, which came out a few months after the Batman v Superman film. And I just, as I say again, everyone's got their own opinion, and that's okay, whatever. But this Suicide Squad made by David Alta, I think he did a great job, and I felt this film was way better than the Batman v Superman. I feel it was. I just feel it was way better than that was. And I think the characters, and the funny thing is, it goes places where you don't think it's going to go. That's the thing about it. I didn't think it was going to go to here, to there, and whatever. And go figure, it went to a different place, because you never know who's the real bad. In a way, you do know who's a real bad guy. That's the person who created the Ventures. Who created the Suicide to begin with, who grouped them up. That's the real villain. It's like Emperor Palpatine. He's the real villain. Besides, I mean, true enough, we see Darth Vader in his as executing justice in terms of who he's going to kill, but Palpatine is the one who's pulling the strings. So I feel like he's the real villain in that in this, and the real villain is the one that created the Suicide Squad. Sad to say, but you just never know. But that was so-called, that was the first, that was the second half. That was 20. Now we're coming up to the roundup. We're coming up to number 10. We come up to the final of the 30 here. And we're at, we're actually at an hour and 25 minutes. Some people think this is going to be longer, but I didn't think it was going to be that long. It just depends on how you do it. And we're at number 10, and at number 10 is, and I mentioned this before, the aforementioned Infinity War of the Avengers. This was the first time we get to see all the characters in the MCU that were mentioned from the first Iron Man up until now, all in his film, all together. The Guardians of the Galaxy, the Black Panther. Yeah, because Black Panther came out before this film came out. You know, our, you know, Captain America, you know, Black Widow, all that. Everyone, the Hulk is in here. Everyone came in to play, and you know, it's all action based. But in the end, the film gives you a credible ending that I can I can for myself say I didn't see coming. I didn't see it coming. I was like, what? It ended like that? And I actually got pissed that it ended like that. I was like, no way. This shit ended like this. I was like, I'm like, wow. But that's not the reason why it's at number 10. No, it's just like it's the ones that I have later are way higher than. And I was like, man, come on. That's no way to do this. That's no way. But as it turns out, that is the way. This is the way, you know. And I'm glad that the Russo brothers did an excellent job in making this film the way it was. They did a brilliant job. Brilliant. I mean, the characters all gel together. It's hard to balance a tumultuous of different characters all in one match. And this is one of the reasons why it's at the where it's at now, you know. And to me, I feel like this film, you know, should be at at the top 10, you know, because it's got a lot of action, but at the same time, it's the reason why it's at this list, because other ones are a little bit, you know. But you'll find out when we get there. Now at number 9 is one of my favorite of the Captain America films, although we'll get to the rest, is Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier, man. Now this was a dude. I went to this film blind, you know, because Captain America, you know, he's not the most powerful of the Avengers. I mean, he's super strength, you know, he's able to do what he can too, you know, toss something. But I did not expect him to be, you know, I didn't expect this film to be what it was. I really didn't. I didn't know that it was going to be this spectacular, you know, amazing kind of film. And I was just like, what? Really? I was kind of like, oh shit, this is what this film is doing, you know. And the funny thing is, when you find out, I mean, I'm pretty sure anyone who's seen it already, but I'm not going to give no spoilers away. But I was kind of like, because remember I said before, because I knew when I saw the trailer, it's like I already know who the Winter Soldier was, which is Bucky Barnes. That's no big secret. I can feel like, yeah, that's Bucky. You know, he's been brainwashed through the whatever that is. But when you find out who the real villain is, when you find out who the real person pulling all these strings, when you find out who really is, you know, the so-called villain in terms of who's doing all this, you'd be like, wow, then you mean to tell me that it was never really something that was going to be tossed away to the wind. It was like it was always there, you know. And when you find out who it is, it's like it's such a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. Yeah, I mean, it's trust me. Look, that's why it's on the list, Nina. It's a really well made film. I mean, not because of action, but because of storytelling. You know, I mean, the action does amazing in here. You know, and I like I say, I gotta say, this film is, without saying that, it does what it does in terms of, you know, character driven and discovering what Captain America has to do for himself in terms of what he needs to do to correct course certain things, you know. And he's being true to himself, but at the same time showing that he has to do what's necessary to be done. So yeah, Captain America. I mean, Winter Soldier, man. I mean, Oftentimes I watch it just for, when I'm really bored, but it's no, dude, it's a well-made film because it's a blend of good action but good storytelling and keeps you in suspense when you find out who is really the bad guy in this film. Just like, I love that. I just love it. So, but on to the number 8, and we're into another DC. We're into another DC film, and it's probably one of the best of the Christopher Reeve films. One of the best, which is Superman 2. And Superman 2 is, how can you not have this on the list? I mean, you can play off and say it shouldn't be on the list, but yeah, I feel it has to be on this list because this is the moment where Superman, he wants to have certain things, but he has to sacrifice certain things. And then when the three Kryptonians come to Earth to play, that's when it's like, I got to do something. And see, you got to throw those things in there and this is one of the things I feel like this is the first film I feel did the trope first, showing that, okay, I'm this person who has these powers, but what's going to make me lose my powers in order to then get them back? And one of the things I like about that is that they do it kind of subtly in doing that. They don't just throw it out there. So I feel that that's the reason why a film like this is so iconic, because some people have said this is the best of the Superman film. Although it depends on your point of view. It depends on your point of view. What's the best? What's the worst? Which one's better? I personally feel like it's still my favorite. It's one of my favorite of the Superman films, with Christopher Reeve starring in it. No, I see. I can tell you now, I don't feel it has anything to do with directors, Neenan. I think what it has to do with is that what it boils down to is that, because believe it or not, I mean, if anyone's seen the Donner cut of Superman 2, it had nothing to do with director switching. Because I'm not going to go into the conversation about that, because if you want to check it out, I would say go do some homework and look up the reason. But I don't think it is, because the second one still has that feel of what the first one did, of the first Superman, the 78 version. It still has something that Dick Donner once said. It has that verisimilitude effect, where it's something so extraordinary, but still has that realism and conveyed in it, And as much as the directors would change, Richard Lester still was able to create a very, grounded in, like 100% verisimilitude type of film. I think he did a very good job in doing that. And I feel like if he hadn't done that, this film would been scattered to the wind in terms of what it brought. Because, like I say, Clark Kent or Kal-El has to see certain challenges they have to do, and that's not even with the three Kryptonians. He has to deal with his inner battles of like, what can he have and what he cannot have, and what he should do in terms of, basically making sure that the world is safe. What does he have to do? What does he have to sacrifice? He would have to sacrifice his happiness. He would have to sacrifice his moral. He would have to sacrifice certain things that are morally wrong in order to do what's right. And Superman comes to realize this. I think it's a real growing moment for this film, because where we saw in the first one where he's where he is, he has to do what he does, he's compelled to do what he has to do. But here it's a very conflictive feeling of what needs to be done in terms of what needs to be going down. So it's like I say, it's a battle. is a battle within oneself, and we kind of see this in number 3 where he does this. Although number 3 we already know it's not that correct either, but I mean it's still got where it counts. Battle his inner demons, become what he's known for, you know. And usually sequels do not do that well in terms of keeping up the storyline. You know, we've certain stories, you know, certain sequels do very well. I mean, Superman 2 is just the exception. Empire Strikes Back and various other films that are sequels do well. But this was up with the ante of who he is and what he has to do and what needs to be done necessarily. And yeah, I mean, Superman 2 is basically not a rehash, but a continuation of Superman and all the people that invade his world in terms of what he has to do and what battles he has to fight in order to maintain a sense of what needs to be done right, you know, a sense of moral. But yeah, it's not easy being blue when you're trying to, you know, keep the world in check and make sure everything's safe. But sometimes you have to bite the bullet of being what is necessary in the end. You know, so we've done number 8, and now we're going to number 7, and number 7 is my favorite of the Captain America films. Winter Soldier is definitely close, but Civil War definitely takes the cake with this. And oh my God, dude. Well, as I say again, if you was to break down the story behind the original Superman, you realize that they were shooting 1 and 2 simultaneously, but the Sulkines and Donner had some mixed feelings about one another, and well, the rest is history. So I won't go into the details on that, but yeah, that's what happens. You know, that's what happens, and that it always does happen like that. You know, it's kind of funny because it seemed like the story behind the rift that's going on behind the making of the film is probably more ambitious than what's going on with the film itself. And you know, yeah, it'd be like that sometimes. You know, it's just like you'd be surprised how many films are out there that have so many major stories that are going on behind the scenes, you know. And you can write books about this. You know, you can write books about this. I mean, like Galaxy Quest, like say the original Superman film. You can say Ghostbusters. You know, they have so many stories behind it. It's so many layers of stories going on behind the scenes. It'll be a perfect documentary to discuss. You know, it'll be a perfect book to discuss. It'll be something else. You know. Well, I don't think I'll do that. I mean, I'll just say, meaning that if I was to do that, I'll if I was to do that, I might do it. And I'm assuming you mean the Superman, the Superman 8 movie. If I was to do that, I would probably wait until the year it came out and do a 50th anniversary talk about it. Yeah, but I no, I'm not. I'm not because it's so much. As I said again, it's so many layers talking about that film. It's like deafening. You know, I'll just say that. But no. But getting back to the list, the third Captain America film is Civil War, and not because it has all these other characters we mentioned before in the Avengers. No, this film is a very mixed bag of conflicts, ideologies that come into play and how they conflict with one another. And it's very hard to see something played out as, you know, should this be right? And the funny thing is, both sides are wrong, but none of them are right. are right either. I mean, none of them are. No, that's the worst way to say it. None of them are wrong, but none of them are right. Also, that's the thing about it. How can one not be right and the other one not be wrong? Well, believe it or not, they believe because certain circumstances have happened, this should be the action that they should place on themselves. But if they do it this way, it would lead to something more horrific. So, Civil War is a very epic, and this came out the same year as Batman v Superman, and I'm gonna say right now, Batman v Superman is not a bad film either, but I feel like I don't know, it just seemed like something should have been done better with that, but as it turns out, it didn't go so well, and the triumphant one was Civil War. Go figure, I mean, and they made sure to really blend the characters who have some beef or whatever with one another very well. Again, this is another film that was directed by the Russo brothers, and they did an awesome job. And I mentioned before, The Winter Soldier was directed by the Russo brothers. Did an awesome job with it. So that's my number 7. Number 6. Well, this was a long time coming and a long time in effect. Deadpool and Wolverine. Deadpool and Wolverine. There's not much to say. I mean, there's much to say about it, and as much as you can say about it. But this film is a glorious, just fan favorite, fan made thing for fans. But at the center of it is a good story showing that in the midst of this film, we realize it's dealing with the TVA and how they pretty much, a reason why the Logan that we see here is a different Logan than the one that died in Logan, you know, and it's kind of funny how this film, affects you in a way that every Logan has, their own personas in different multiverses. But at the same time, we realize that, this Logan has one of the guys in the thing saying he's the worst of the Wolverines, you know. But at the same time, Deadpool is suffering from his own anxieties and saying that I want to matter, I want to be a baddie. I want to actually mean something. I want to matter. And like I say, he does the fourth wall breaking and everything, but there's much more to it than just him breaking the fourth wall. He really, really, really hones in and does the things that matter the most in this film. And yes, this film was very wide. It was really well made and well placed, and there was, things that were hoping on that didn't get made. But no, this film is definitely up there. And like I say, it's one of those films that like I say, I don't like to say, maybe the hype was just that. It was hype, but it was a good hype. I say it was a good hype. And like I said, again, there is a story behind all this, when watching it. Yeah, you're gonna get your Easter egg. There's so many Easter eggs in this film, but look at what's going on that leads you to realizing why these characters are in this, or invested in this. So that is my number 6. And let me just say that I just never imagined that, the films that we mentioned before would be at the list that they are now. What was this? Well, it's always like that. It's always going to be that, It's always going to be like that. I mean, you do have sequels that can overshadow the original, but we got to remember the original is the reason why it got started in the first place. We can always say that because I've heard many people say Mothra versus Godzilla is like top tier of the original Godzilla, but in the end, I don't think that's really true. The original Godzilla will always be Gojira will always be the top of the Godzilla films, the 54 version. Always be. That's if that's an opinion of mine, that's an opinion of someone else's, and this goes without saying. But, but here we're narrowing down to the number, getting close to number one, and we're at the top five people, and it's been a long journey, and we're at yeah. Surprisingly, we've gone longer than I thought we were, but I mean, surprisingly, it's been a good ride. It's been a good long trip. And we are at number 5 of the list because, like I say, these are the top 5 I feel are my favorites in terms of comic book films. So let's get going. And at number 5 is one of the what's his name? Tom Holland Spider-Man. We mentioned him in Civil War. So he was in number 7 with them. But here he's get to showcase his own film, but he was in films with Homecoming and Far From Home, where this one is Spider-Man No Way Home. And let's just say that this is where they put all. I mean, you still got the bravado and everything, but you got a film where it shows how a kid hasn't learned. I mean, he hasn't grown up yet, and he does this unthinkable by going to a sorcerer who is dumb enough to include and do something that says that, hey, why don't we include this to be be here, and this is the reason why we're doing this. It's like, dude, did you not do you not stop and think that this is going to be a bad idea? And this opened up the floodgates for the multiverse, if you really think about it. And sure enough, we see all past people from different universes of Spider-Man's world. I mean, in the Spider-Man world, come into play, and the funny thing is, we see some people live, we see some people die. But again, I'm not going to get too much away about that. It's a fun ride, and it's well made because you realize Peter Parker really has to learn to grow as an individual, as a person who realized I made some mistakes and I should have known better. But that's only because he's a kid. He's still a teenager. He hasn't really developed into a real, adult. Because when you're an adult, you're supposed to make better choice decisions. But he makes one of the worst kinds, and it almost causes the multiverse everything. But in the end, you see the film, it actually costs him something, but I won't say what that is. And like I say, it's a turnaround with including Doc Ock, the Green Goblin. We see Electro, Jamie Foxx, with clothes on, and Sandman in here. It's just a mixed bag of good stuff. And the funny thing is, those guys were in different universes with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and it's it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I love it. And I think it's something that needs to be expressed. Yeah, it blew, because it I would say it blew me away too. And it's an example of a film that I feel does a great job of explaining. You got to make wise choices with your life, but you got to make sure that it doesn't affect everyone else around you in terms of, it's going to destroy some things, and as I say, he pays the price for certain things, but it happens. But again, This just shows how if you're not mature enough to do the right thing, then that's what's going to happen. That's the price you pay for it. So, but that's number 5. Number 4, I bet some people didn't think about this one, but I'm going to say it. If anyone's seen the theatrical version of Justice League, then you know that a film was originally supposed to be 3 hours. Oh my God, that film. I can see that it should have been greater than what it was, but it missed the boat tragically. But then again, somebody was hollering that somebody needs to release the actual cut of this film in its form that it deserved. And Zack Snyder went back and took all the footage that he shot, re-edited, and we got the cut of Justice League that we deserve, which is Justice League, the Snyder cut. The Snyder cut is ahead of the theatrical cut in many senses of the word. And I'm just like, yes, this film is so much better than the theatrical. I mean, we all know about the mustache skate, mustache gate incident. It's just like, oh my Lord, you people. And the story behind that reason why the theatrical cut was released the way it was, it all boiled down to the people at Warner Brothers wanting a bonus at the end, so they rushed this film out. And they feel like, well, if we rush this film out, the people who's working there will get their bonuses. It's like, so you're not worried about making money, is what you're saying, huh? I thought that was the whole purpose of it, to make money. So these individuals released this film. They chopped it down. They got Joss Whedon into reshoot, reshot, rehash, all this bullshit. And what we got was a very trumped up version, a less than 2-hour version of what was originally going to be a 4-hour, spectacle. But again, examples of why you should not let studios fuck with your shit when you're trying to do something. And of course, we know about let's see here. Yeah, I'm definitely, yes. It's, Nina said it best. It was such a, oh my God, I'll just say that it was a bad mix of why you should not let studio interference mess with your stuff. And thankfully, Snyder said, I'm going to, rebrand this film and get it back onto the way it was meant to be. I mean, and that's probably the reason why I, for myself, have the movie in question, because I was never going to get that film when I saw it. I mean, I was like, no, I don't want this film. This film is how this is what it was meant to be. This is the deserving part of what a movie like that is. A comic book film is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like this, not the crap we got in the theatrical cut. That's not what we're supposed to get, But again, this is just how things are, and this is the reason why studios, And I should mention this. This is the thing I have to mention. The reason why studio heads do this anyway goes way back to a film called Heaven's Gate. And Heaven's Gate was an example of a director who. Directors, they have their ambitions, they have their drives, and they're still a story. But when you let the director go off hinge and go off the rails with what they're doing, it shows that you can ruin a film and you can totally destroy a studio's cred. And this is where studios after that realize, like, we're not going to let these ambitious individuals, these artists, destroy what we have, and you just allow this to happen the way it is. So If you ever heard of a film called Heaven's Gate, go back nearly 50 years and look it up, and you'll discover what I'm talking about. You'll discover, because just another example of why interference from studios happens. It's because of that film. It goes way back. Because studio, I mean, like I say, studio interference isn't always a thing, because they see that, because they don't do this to Steven Spielberg, they don't do this to Christopher Nolan. They know that they're going to get the job done. But it's someone who's not seasoned, who's still kind of green, who hasn't had their cherry pop. They're going to go after them, because they feel like we don't have something great here. And that's probably why we don't have much of originality in films nowadays, because of because of situations like that, And let me say it here. Very true. Very true. Because season one and two, and Rogue One are perfect examples of. And now I will say, with Rogue One, they did have a little bit of interference from studios, but the end result was that it became a much like movie than the sequels that had Ray in them. It's how it is. It's And speaking of studio interference, um, not so much major studio interference, but we're coming up to number three, and it is my favorite of the Superman films, which is the original '78 version of Superman, the Dick Donner version. And the thing I'm thinking about this is that it wasn't so much negative, it wasn't so much studio interference. It was more like, well, we got this film and we got it going on. We're going to try to see if we can put this out at a time where people are going to enjoy it, and hopefully they will enjoy it. Okay. And they took a gamble and they won. And this is before the whole Heaven Gates situation. And it did well. But as I mentioned before, the Sokines and Donner had some mixed, take on one another. And in the end, well, the film came a box office hit, but they still had mixed feelings, and Dick Donner got fired. So it had nothing to do with the studio. It had something to do with the producers and the director. But the end result is the two, even though they they had mixed feelings about one another, the film became this iconic superhero film, which I can still remember to this day when I went to see it with my mom took me and my brother to go see it on a cold night. It was cold. I can still remember how cold it was. This was at a time, and see, I live in Louisiana, and right now it's not even cold. It's like 78 degrees right now. After Christmas, but it was cold that day. It was no night. I didn't know what to expect from this film. I didn't know what to hear from it. But I know when I went to go see it and watch it, when the letters come flashing towards you and everything, or go away from you, it's like I'm in for something. And I'm only 8 years old. Looking from the pinpoint for the person who's 8 years old, and you realize why this stuff is so much likable. Why it's up there. But Superman, the first, the '78 Superman Dick Donner movie is such a brilliant film. And what's funny is some of the stuff that's in a so-called deleted, or what you call cut, it's not in a cut. It was actually in the movie, and it's actually in the theatrical cut that I saw. You know, but some people want to doubt that it's not. It's like, no, I saw it with my eyes. And somebody said, well, you was only 8 years old. No, it's stuck. It's imprinted on my brain forever. I remember these scenes being in the film in the theater when I saw it. I remember that. I so remember that. You know. Hey, and you know what? That I always say, stick to your guns, Nina. And that's what I'm talking about. You know, always do that. Always stick to your guns when it comes to how you feel about film. And that's why I say that's for me. That's what I like. You know, it's like I love these films, and let's say this is a childhood favorite. You know, it still sticks to me to this day, to this moment, even nearly 50 years later. You know, and I mean, like I say, like I say, I still remember when my mom took me to see it. I still remember when my brother-in-law watched it, and it still holds tried and true in my heart, in my soul, why I love it so much. You know, it's there. It's just something that will never go away. You know, it's always going to be there for me. See, but we're going on to number two, and well, I guess this shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but I mentioned two of the other Avenger films that I like, and this one is definitely at the top of it. Avengers Endgame. This film was, I think the only reason why this film works so well is because of marketing, of not showing a whole lot, not giving away a whole lot, and let the people who are going to see this film, let them sit for 3 hours and watch, because this film is not so much an action-packed film. It's got action where it counts, but it's such a character-driven film. That's again why I can't stress this enough. You can have all the most extraordinary things in a film whatsoever, all the effects, all the bravado, all these things. But if you don't have a strong, strong, strong story with strong characters in them, it's no sense of you doing this. I mean, the movie's going to fail drastically. And when I got through watching this film, I was like, whoa, this film is tremendously good. It blew me the hell away. I did not know what to expect from this. And I'm so glad that I went into it so blindly, because I did not want to be, I didn't want to be shown, through a lot of, bullshit, I'm saying, oh, this is in here. This is it. It's like, thankfully that did not happen. And like I say, it's a wonderfully made, and I had actually said that because that's what's kind of funny. Black Panther got nominated for Best Picture. That's probably the first comic book film to ever be nominated for Best Picture Oscar, which didn't win. But I felt like this picture should have been nominated for Best Picture. I think it should have, And the reason why I say that, because it really gets you emotional, gets you going. And I know when the end scene at the end, you cry. This is me. I cried for a minute. I cried for a good. I say I cried for a good 2 minutes watching what was going on, what was being prepared on screen, and I cried. I was like, "Oh my God, this is actually happening." But the reason why I was crying, not because all these people come together, but showing that they're coming together to fight tyranny and so-called take on this person who's doing what they're doing. But when they start to go in it, what they're doing, them tears dried up real quick, and it's like, this is the moment where I became from a little, from a, adult to a 5-year doing this. I was doing this, so I was just like, dude, I was just glued. I was like, I couldn't get enough. I was like a kid in the candy kind of moment, and I swear that's how it was for me, Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? That's why I say this movie peaked at that moment when it came to doing what it did. It really showed, that they took the time to tell the story, and that's probably why it's a 3-hour movie, because they took their time to tell the story and not give you a lot of BS when talking about it. They really took their time and really gave you what needs to be told and talked about. I feel that's what it needs to do. and that's why I say it's that's why I feel it's such a beautiful made film. And unfortunately, after a lot of the films, after superhero films came out there, well, only a few, not a lot, came out, at the bottom. And you know, it's kind of how it is. I mean, it's sad to say. Well, I know. Look, I know I was crying on a lot of the moments with some characters in there, and that shows how invested you are with the characters. You know, when you make when you make char- when you make characters like this and put them on a celluloid, you got to make sure that you're invested with the characters. As I said before, if you don't care for the characters, you don't care for their so-called whatever they do. And it's like you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose big time. And I feel like that's the reason why this film is such a grand finale of you know spectacle. But unfortunately, again, I don't know what this film with Doomsday is going to do. If it does well, fine. If it doesn't, maybe it's time for it just to hang it up. I feel it has to be. But with that being said, let me name some honorable mentions in terms of this list. And it's kind of funny, as I said before, certain things should have been on this list, but they're not. And should have been had been. But again, you gotta choose one without you gotta choose one and choose the other. This is how it works. An honorable mention, Chang-Chi and the Chang-Chi and the what's it called? Chang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. That's what it is. Yes, that's on there. Honorable mention. One of DC films, The Batman, which was directed by Matthew Reeves, that came out just recently, 3 years ago, which I feel is a very well-made Batman film. I think it's a very well-made film altogether. And I knew I'm not going to say forget, but Logan should have been on this list, but it was just it's still in hindsight that it would be on here, But Logan was a definite mention because Logan was showing the events of Logan after many things before, and how he finally has his ultimate death in the end, you know. And I feel like that's when you realize, like I say, that's how you make a film. That's how you do a film, you know. But that's pretty much it. And what's number one? Well, I'm going to let y'all take a wild guess, and you probably know what it is. But if you don't know what it is, well, I mentioned this before, and even Neiman said this before. It's very rare when a sequel does better than the original. Well, this is probably my favorite of all super or comic book films ever. And to me, I feel like this was just the pinnacle of, I mean, I thought I'd seen it before, but this film really did it for me. And I knew when I went to go see it back in 2008, I was like, all right, this is a film that's going to do well. I mean, it's going to do partially well. It shattered all my expectations to the ground. It's never going to come back, from it. And I gotta say, it's just one of those films that I feel like is out there. Oh, okay, you got a list here. Yeah, Blade One would definitely be up there. Yes. See, Thunderbolt. Well, I think you mean Thoughts and Bolts. I don't think you mean Thunderballs. That's a Bond film. Um, Burton Batman, Judge Dredd. Yes, and yeah, I can see that. Well, my number one of all my favorite of comic book films is the reigning king of them all. The Dark Knight. Yes. Can you actually can you actually believe that, or can you believe that? I think you believe that. The Dark Knight. Yes. Let's be honest. This is the pinnacle of filmmaking in terms of blending action, characters, and a good story all in one. And this is probably Christopher Nolan's crown jewel, I feel. This is his ultimus magnus. This is his, biggest opera. This is everything that led to this. The Dark Knight is probably the pinnacle of comic book movies in my mind. The Dark Knight is pure, just it's funny how this film is came after 3 years later after Batman Begins, and Batman Begins it's pretty well made film, but this movie, The Dark Knight, crushes it, dismantles it, it just devours it. And I know when you see the opening sequence of this film, it's like, dude, it is beyond what you think it's going to be, you know. And the funny thing is, everything is done more in camera than anything else. I mean, yes, you have a blend of CG moments, certain, but that's only the sweet in certain places. It has real stunts in there. And the funny thing is, Christopher Nolan's a traditionalist like myself. He used the real in-camera effects to do some of the stuff that's in this film. And it's funny when the villain, the antagonist, overshadows the protagonist. Heath Ledger does an amazing job of what he did in this film. And it's sad that he passed away after this film, or no, before this film came out. Um, okay, hey, like I say, which is why maybe you should, you know what, Neenan? You should do the ultimate thing and make a list on your own for top favorite comic book films. I think you ought to do that. Do it for yourself. Because for me, this is what I look at in terms of top favorite of comic book films, and I feel like that's the thing, man. I mean, yeah. Oh yeah, the Watchmen, the Ultimate Cut. I have to agree. It is definitely a good, well-made film. That's another Snyder film that I feel is kind of overlooked. I think it is. I went in the theater, the theatrical cut, but the Ultimate Cut is it's yeah, it's an even better film, I feel. But again, The Dark Knight reigns supreme in my mind as the top of the of superhero films, comic book films. And like I say, I mean, we've had films that are comic book based, that based on comic book heroes like Hancock, or you know, what's the name? Unbroken, Unbreakable, not Unbroken, Unbreakable with Bruce Willis. I feel like that's another example of showcasing comic book movies. I mean, comic books, and bringing them to life in a era where it's not DC or Marvel, you know. And it's like I say, but like I say, they are homages to stuff like this, and this is an example of where the hero, the superhero, doesn't have special powers. He's an ordinary man who has special techniques and gadgets that get him by in the end. He's somebody who actually proves his worth by having a drive to do what's necessary in order to get the job done. And yeah, the Dark Knight is pretty much what showcases what you do right and do well in terms of what you're doing. Um, Yes, it's coming up 20 years that it originally came out. But oh no, it'll definitely be on top. All it'll be. See, and the funny thing is, this film you can't mention it without knowing that, it's like, oh, it's a comic book film. It's like, well, no. See, this is what I'm talking about. You can do a film like this, and it's not necessarily looking at it from a comic book field. You're looking at it from a well-made storytelling field. It's a well-made film that has a good story to it. You know, and I feel like it proves where Batman has to actually probably draw the line or break the line of what he has to do in terms of what he needs to do in terms of keeping the peace, keeping the justice going on. I feel that that's the reason why this film sticks with me to this day, because it really showcases what I feel is a good comic book film. I feel it is a good comic book film because it can be up there with like Gone with the Wind or with Godfather or with the original Star Wars, A New Hope. It can be up there not because of its glitz and glamour, but because it's a well-made film that stands the test of time. It always will. I mean, if this movie hadn't been originally well, brother, as I said before, it was not an easy task, but I was willing to make the challenge. But the thing about it is that I really wanted to do it and see for myself what, was number one. And like I say, I always felt that this was going to be number one. This is always going to be number one. But in the end, what other films would coincide with it on the list in terms of being at the top, but yeah, and I thank you for telling me that, Nina. I mean, thank you for telling me that. But no, this is not an easy list. This is not easy. It wasn't easy. It was never. But I feel like that's the good thing why it wasn't easy, because if it was easy, I would have taken the challenge. It wouldn't have been a challenge to me because I have to hone into myself. What do I feel is, you know, right up there? And this one is definitely that. It's up there in terms of its experience, its genre, and it's like I say, I don't necessarily look at it as a comic book movie. I look at it as a film, a well-made, story structured film that, as Nina said, it's going to stand the test of time, and it has. Even nearly 20 years later. And I always feel like when people watch films like this, that's the thing they look at. They don't look at it as that genre. They look at it as like, oh, that's a well-made movie. That's a well-made film. And that's how you should look at it as, you know. And that's like I say, that's the reason why it's number one on my list as my favorite of comic book films. So, and there you go. That's pretty much it. That was an amazing journey. 30 comic book films, and I did it all in the span of over 2 hours. I mean, probably been longer, but I feel like I knew how to kind of time it and everything. But it did well. It did great. But I feel I wanted to share that with you to show you that I'm a film goer. I'm a film lover, and like I say, through time, I've seen some amazing feats of film, storytelling. But at the same time, I've seen some very not worth the time kind of films in my mind. I don't think it's worth the time. But this list is, like I say, it was hard to do, but I'm glad I did it because it is one of those films that it was one of those films. It's one of those things that I had in my mind that I think I need to get on there and put out there. This is why I say I put it in the category of personal junk or favorites, because it's one of those subjects that I feel like doesn't get talked about too much. And I'm glad that I've done this. I'm glad that I went through this, and yes, it's done. It's over with. It's in the bag. Bam, bam. And brother. And that's the same with me. Kudos to, I mean, I concur with that. I'm glad to call you my brother also, brother. Yes. Yes. I'm like I say that that's why I wanted to share this with you. I mean, like I say, this journey is just as much as your journey, as much as anyone else is watching, and I'm thinking that hopefully that you enjoyed this. So not much coming on my channel anytime soon. I mean, I know next Friday I will have something right after the new year, because this is probably, no, in fact, I can tell you now, this is my last video for this year. I've been doing videos all this year, started back in, well, before I got my laptop, I started back in February, and I've been doing it like this since then. And since I got this laptop, I've been doing more creative things on that off and on, and it's been a blast. It's been a courageous blast, and I'm just so thrilled that I I'm just glad that I'm able to do what I'm able to do, express myself even more, because this has always been that's the reason why I'm doing this now. It's all about expression. It's not about trying to get clout, not trying to be who I know and who does this. It's all about what do I like? What do I like to do? I mean, people already know that I love Godzilla. That's here and this. I mean, that's obvious. But what has always been there in me is like, what do I love to express about and what I love to talk about? And thankfully, this gave me the drive to do more, and I want to do more. So coming next week, which is around the 2nd, I'm going to be talking about a film that's coming up 10 years since no, not 10 years, 15 years since its release, Super 8. But I'm not going to be discussing it in terms of the movie. I mean, I will kind of point out some things about the movie, but why is the movie being discussed about in the first place? It has a lot to do with my personal experience in life. But I'll talk about that when we get there, and when we do, you'll know why I'm talking about. So, but that's pretty much all for it. I'm not going to be doing anything as far as the rest of the year, because well, this is the 26th. Like not 4 more days. See, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, about 5 more days until the new year, 2026, and yeah, it's let's see here. That's the thing. You come from a child to an adult, and you hope that the journey was worth it, because the destination is just the destination. It's the journey to get to the destination that makes the sense. And I think this has been a great journey. And I've had some things that happened this year that are overwhelming. True enough, I've gone to California for the first time in my life. Major twist in my life. But I've had some things that happened to me in this year that was not fulfilling, or that's irritating and very upsetting, which was someone betraying my trust, and letting me know it's like I have to really be aware of my surroundings more often than I usually do. But it's never too old to learn certain things, and I'm just glad that I did learn them before it's too late. But yeah, this is my final video for this year, and I won't be doing anything till the next year, which is the next week, which is on the 2nd. And that's pretty much it, everyone. I mean, hopefully everyone who's watched, who's going to watch, hopefully you had a great time watching it with this, this countdown, this journey that I've experienced. And it's been fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you, Neenan, Nubis, who all commented on here. Thank you for everything, and yeah, that's pretty much a wrap on it. I mean, 2025 been a crazy year, but at the same time, been an amazing journey for me, and I hope it'll be the same for you also. So, as I always close out, and I always will close out. When it's coming with the films, I do it like this, but when it comes to kaiju, I do it another way. But as I always close out, y'all take care, y'all be patient, and always keep the film legacy alive. And y'all take care, and hey, happy new year, okay? Hopefully the new year is more promising than this one. Y'all take care now.